everybody. Thank you so much. Julie is quite the tough act to follow, so hopefully I can keep you as engaged as I'm sure she did. So I am the media director here at Nelson Schmidt. My team oversees all paid media planning and buying for our clients. So everything from integrated lead generation to print to digital, including paid search and SEO, which we are going to cover today. So I'm really excited to be sharing some time with you all this afternoon. What we're going to cover in today's session, we're going to dive deeply into the topics of paid search and organic search. So we'll talk about the basics. What's the difference between paid and organic? You'll hear me talk a lot about how these two aspects of search impact each other. We'll give you some insight as to how search affects your business. And we'll spend a lot of our time talking about how Maytag has strategically implemented both SEO and paid search as part of their 2021 plans. We'll give you a lot of helpful hints, just like Julie did, in terms of how to get started. And we'll end with some additional resources on how you can get started, additional training, as well as some insight as to how you might want to outsource if this is not something your current staff can handle. So first, to start with how search affects your business, I'm sure we've all realized, Google is now basically a verb, right? There has been an incredible increase in search activity in recent years, and this stat continues to blow me away every time I look at it. A 4,000% increase in searches for nice laundromat near me in the last 5 years. So we know that consumers are searching for this type of information more and more every single day, every year. And with that, it is really forcing the store owners that you serve to search for how to stay ahead of the competition. We've seen a almost 200% increase in searches for terms like commercial washing machine in that same time period. So that type of behavior and increase in search is really having an impact on your business. So to successfully position yourself as the solution to what these store owners need, it's really important that you set your site up for success. So before we get into some of the how-tos, we'll cover some key definitions just in case a lot of these terms are new to you. So SEO, if you're not familiar, stands for search engine optimization. This is related to, really maximizing the number of visitors to your site and making sure that you show up on organic search results. The goal here is to really optimize your content to make sure that your website appears organically as close to the top when someone is searching. The next comparison we want to make, just in case it's not clear, is you'll hear me say a lot, paid and organic. So as you know, when you type something into Google, you're presented with a list of search results. Paid search results are like what you see on the top, where it's sort of clearly noted as ad. This means it's sponsored, someone's paying for it. The other instance you'll see is organic search. So that's like the example we're pointing to a little bit further down on the screen. So this is something that is showing up as a result of SEO. That means that as Google scans and searches the page, it knows that we are a really solid answer for the inquiry that the user has. And we're going to talk a lot about paid and organic because there is significant research from Google and other sources that show how it's really important to kind of attack it from both sides. You can't rely just on paid or just on organic. A couple more key terms for you. Just as keywords are something that we talk a lot about. This has relevance to both the organic and paid as well. On the organic side, keywords are specific terms that you want to make sure shows up all throughout your content on the site. And as we get into the search section in a couple slides, you'll start to see where we talk about where it's really important to have key terms show up in different areas of the content on your site. So, this is an example of a tool that we use to kind of map certain content and terms when we were building landing pages for this year's plan that we wanted to make sure showed up because we know that those are important terms for the user. To the right of that, you'll see paid. This is a little image we took from inside our Google Ads platform. So this is showing, for example, specific words that we are bidding on or buying in paid search. So this is us saying, okay, we really want to pay to try to ensure that we show when someone is searching for commercial washer and dryer. So keywords is a common term that's really relevant in both. Something that's also important for success in both paid and organic is accessibility. So this is simply just making sure that your site is accessible by everyone. So this is someone who might have visual challenges, cognitive, or what I call just the mechanical fat finger challenge. So you want to make sure that your site is easy to navigate and accessible by anyone, so no matter what their ability is. And this is actually something that, behind the scenes, search engines will look for when determining how suitable your site is, and helps determine if it's a link that someone is going to find value in if they click on. Couple more terms for you that are specific really to SEO. You'll see meta title and description. So this information is something that is kind of programmed on the back end of your site, no matter what platform your site is built within. And the purpose of these two elements is really to give the search engines a solid idea of the intent of your page to the user. It helps the user make an informed decision as to whether your site is the answer to their question. The meta title specifically is sort of the official title of your page. So that's the item there that is in purple because I've actually clicked on it. And then the description is below that, again, these both appear in organic search results. And the description just gives a little bit more of a detailed explanation of the content that the user will see if they click on that particular link. Once someone gets to your site, there's a couple more terms that you will see. You'll see here H1 content and H2 subhead on the left. So the H1 content is sort of the main headline for that page. It's the first bit of copy that a user is drawn to, and it really has heavy SEO implications. You want it to be big. You'll notice here it's a different font. It's not really highlighted like that on the site, but we did that for the purposes of this presentation. It really is critical in making sure it's big, noticeable. You want to make sure that it takes into account your keywords that we talked about. You want to keep this relatively short at a max of about 20 to 70 characters in length. Below that, we have the H2. Think of that as sort of a sub-bullet to your main headline. This gives the user a little bit more information about the content that's going to be on the site, what they're about to read. It can also really be helpful in dividing the content on your page into nice digestible chunks. One of the things that's really important for users to have a good experience, but also to ensure that you have a successful sort of scoring or assessment in SEO is people want to be able to scan your site really quickly. So if you have a good H1 and then your subheads are really specific, it will help the user scan the page quickly and find out exactly which segment of the content on that page answers the questions that they have. The last item I want to talk about on this page is the alt tag. Alt tags, again, these are all things that are sort of programmed on the back end of your site. And an alt tag is really just a small amount of text that describes the image on the page. So you'll notice that we don't say here, woman with ponytail loading laundry. While that is accurate, it is not helpful in answering the question. Alt tags are one of the things that search engines can look to as they're scanning your page to see, yes, does this answer the user's search question? So you'll notice what the alt tag would be in this instance is, multi-load rigid mount 25-pound commercial washer. You may want to consider putting in a specific model number or something like that. So that can be really helpful, again, in making sure that your page shows up as an answer to that question. So content, we've talked a lot about having the right content on your page. So you're probably wondering, well, how much content? How many words? So of course, there's always exceptions, but we have some good guidelines here for you. On average, there's a lot of data that suggests that sort of the sweet spot for average words on a page is about 750. And you want to shoot for a minimum of about 300. Things less than that might be perceived as a little bit too thin by search engines and may indicate that this isn't quite the right amount of content, probably isn't going to have the answer that this person is looking for. Like I said, there's exceptions to every rule of thumb. So, for example, if you have a really important case study or an important technical piece or a research paper, that is something that obviously is going to be a little bit more acceptable to have a longer length. So, use your best judgment, but what is really important to also keep in mind when determining these counts is the headlines, basically everything but sort of that footer and your navigation, all of that factors into that word count. So that is just something important for you to keep in mind. So Maytag has put a lot of these practices that we've talked about so far into play when we were developing and getting our sites ready for our 2021 campaign. So we're going to kind of talk through the process that we engaged with from an SEO perspective. So the first thing that we do is, we wanted to determine the page structure and the content. So, you think of the navigation at the top of a website. We had to think through, okay, what navigation, what topics do we want? And then within each of those content section, how many pages should we have? And what should be the topic of those pages? It's really important that you don't try to put too much pressure on an individual page. For example, you don't want to have a page, one single page, say everything about washers and everything about dryers. You really want to make sure that it is focused. What we move to next, once we get a sense of the overall page structure and content, is keyword research. This is probably about the 20th time I've said the word keyword to you, if you're keeping count. But the keyword research really helps determine how to describe the content and the topic of each page. And remember, a keyword is something that is going to factor into how the person is searching. And you want to make sure those keywords are within the content and the headlines on your site. From there, we are going to develop benchmarks and goals. So this could be everything from how much time do we want people to spend on our site? What are key actions that we might want them to engage with? Goals are really important. And it can also be something that's pretty overwhelming for people. I always say the best benchmarks are your own. The next phase is to actually create those pages that you did the keyword research and created the content structure for. And, so that's literally writing the content, taking a look at it, optimizing as needed. And by the way, optimization is something you will do in perpetuity. From there, you will then develop the alt tags, meta titles, and descriptions that we talked about a slide or two ago. And then, as I mentioned, you constantly monitor and optimize. Paid search as well as SEO is definitely not something that you set and forget. You need to constantly be looking at how your site is performing, how people are engaging with it, what parts they're not engaging with, and then optimizing accordingly. So engaging in these steps will help ensure that when users perform just a basic organic search, it really sets your site up for success to be one of those top options that they will see. So to continue that success, once you have sort of established it for the first time, we have some kind of best practices here that we want you to remember. So quality trumps length in terms of content. So don't feel like you just have to say everything. You want to make sure that it's quality first. And you also want to make sure you have a diverse mix of content. Think about what these store owners might want to see from you. It could be financing. It could be information on different products. It could be service inquiries. So you really want to make sure that you have a diverse mix of content that could serve any need that they have. You also want to be aware of repetition. So that is, within one page, you don't want to be kind of saying the same thing about 10 different ways. And you also don't want a lot of duplicate pages saying the same thing. That's just going to have a bad user experience. And it's also going to kind of confuse the search engines. Importantly, user intent should be at the forefront of everything you do. So really put yourself in the frame of mind of that store owner, that user that's going to be going to your site. How might they want to digest this information? What order might they look into things? What types of links might they expect to see at the bottom of a page? So think about that. And then you want to continually monitor your SERP is just an abbreviation for search engine results page. So you want to be constantly monitoring that and making sure that you aren't seeing huge swings in the wrong direction. And then you also want to identify possible opportunities. So if you do see opportunities for improvement, then you want to implement those changes. So one thing to definitely keep in mind is that when you do make big structural changes like that, you're going to want to allow time for the search engines to kind of catch up with changes that you make. So we have successfully gotten through the SEO or organic portion of that. And now we're going to start to talk about paid search. You'll hear, some pretty common themes, but with a little bit of a different spin on them. So in these examples, I'm going to talk a lot about what we did for the Maytag campaign this year. So our entire, paid campaign this year is really around that replacement mindset and that value proposition that Maytag can bring to the table. So really talking about the business benefits of replacing machines and keeping them in a top-notch status. One of the things that really helps us be successful in doing that for Maytag is what's called a responsive text ad format. So the image that you see with sort of the bluish grayish background there, that is actually a screenshot from the Google Ads platform. And what responsive text ads formats allow us to do is test combinations of different headlines, different ad copy and text. And that allows Google to sort of play around with different combinations, all of which would make sense. So you're not going to come across saying anything goofy. But over time, Google Ads will test and learn which combinations of headlines and descriptions are driving the most clicks, the most qualified clicks, and then also leading to the most amount of desired actions on your site. So it really helps you kind of optimize and test in real time. So what makes a good search ad? How do you know what to put into these headlines? So you want messaging that focuses on user benefits. Why? Obviously, users are going to respond better to ads that speak to their needs. So in the example you see here, we talk about increasing profit potential. And we start to talk about how they can do that. So that's obviously something. And, as we mentioned earlier in the meeting, the research we did with the CLA, financing and profit was a huge impact on what these store owners kept in mind when considering replacement. We also need to make sure we focus on keyword, there's that word again, and ad correlation. So you want to make sure there's consistency between the search term that you're buying, which relates to what the user is searching for, some of the copy in your text, some of the copy in your text ad, as well as the content on the site. When Google is determining which search ad to serve, it's not just who's bidding the most. It scans a ton of different things, including a lot of the things that we talked about within SEO, and it determines which ad is really going to do the best job of answering that user's question. So keeping that correlation in mind really helps you do that. You also want to avoid, generic language. I think this ad on the slide is a great example. We talk about replacing washers and dryers help drive profitability. That's pretty darn specific and lets the user know exactly our position and exactly what they can expect to learn about if they click on it. And then, the ad variations to test and learn. That is one of the big reasons why we love that responsive ad format that I talked about on the last slide, is that allows us to kind of constantly be testing and learning rather than spending, dozens of hours writing a ton of static ads and just kind of guessing and wondering. So that is a great advice on how to make a good search ad. So something you'll want to do to get started with your campaign as a whole, even before you kind of dig into the weeds on creating your ads, is from a business perspective, you want to establish those campaign goals. I said this in the SEO section, but these could be business goals, not just marketing or campaign goals. So you want to establish what those goals are, especially within the context of the budget you have, and you want to make sure that those things are in line. You can look at, KPIs, key performance indicators. How are you going to measure success? Is it an increase in website visits? In most cases, it could be, downloading a particular piece of content. It could be filling out a contact us form. So you want to determine upfront how you are going to be judging success for your campaign. And then importantly, you need to make sure you can measure that. It's not going to do you any good if you say that your goal is to increase some sort of metric that you cannot track on your site. So that's really important to have a measurement plan in place. And then budgeting and expectations. This is an example of just a budgeting spreadsheet that we used for another client of ours. So we'll look at everything from spend to impressions to conversions and conversion rate over time from past campaigns, and then also kind of taking into account what budget we have to work with in this current cycle to help us understand what is realistic for us to achieve in this given year. So, once we've got our campaign set up, we've got these benchmarks, we talked about having those really good ads that will help us learn, we're ready to get started. And once a campaign is launched, there's a few specific things that we do on the Maytag search campaigns that are definitely some best practices that you'll want to do when engaging in paid search as well. So the next slide we're going to show you is these are just a handful of screen grabs that we took from different segments within the actual Google AdWords account for the Maytag 21 replacement campaign. So here you will see how we're able to analyze and dig into performance of specific keywords. So again, these are examples of terms that we are buying and kind of bidding and positioning our ads against. There's a lot more that you can see here beyond what you're seeing right now, but we'll look at cost. We'll see how many clicks within a time period that ad has received. We'll look at click-through rate. One thing that's also really interesting is you'll notice a little note there about negative keywords. If we find that for some reason our ad is getting served when someone searches for a particular term that really isn't relevant, what we can do is negatively target that keyword. That tells Google or whatever platform you're buying paid search in, do not even consider serving our ad or bidding on it when someone searches for something like this. That's kind of related to the image, just to the right of the keyword image where you see searches. This is not necessarily the terms that we are exactly bidding on, but this shows you particular actual searches, what people are typing into that bar on their search engine like Google. And these are some of the terms that are triggering our keywords and our ads to be served. So that can also help us find opportunities to improve and optimize our keywords. These two things all relate to kind of measuring and reporting. The image on the bottom is one of many that we can look to see how different aspects of our campaign are performing. So you could look at how a campaign is performing over time. You can also look into how specific groups of ads and terms are performing. So an example for this would be, you might want to look at your dryer related ads and ad groups differently than you would your washers, or maybe something about finance, for example. And then it's important that you react to what you see. There's about a million different levers that you can pull within any of the paid search platforms to kind of react to what you're seeing. So you can, in real time, really optimize and do a ton of work to help build upon the success that you're seeing. So as you look to increase and maintain success in both paid search and SEO, there's a few key things that we want you to keep in mind that are really important to both aspects of it. Most importantly, it is never too late to get started. I don't care if you've been around for 5 years or 50 years, there's always a benefit to starting and engaging in SEO and paid search. You want to determine what you can afford to spend, both in terms of kind of out-of-pocket costs as well as human resources to make it work and be successful. Then really think about what you hope your campaign can achieve. I've said it before, but the best benchmarks are your own. So establish, look at historical data if you have it. If not, establish your benchmarks from there and move forward. Your kind of guiding principle will be continued and sustained growth and improvement. There are a lot of platform-based tools within a platform like Google Ads, for example. Those can be okay to engage with, but you want to make sure that you have an incredible amount of control within those. Whenever you start paid search, again, it might be a little bit overwhelming and you might be tempted to get into a lot of automation. Google sometimes will say, hey, here's this approach that you can do and we will automate everything for you, and you just set it up. Please never do that. I don't think in my, almost 20 years of doing this, I have seen that work well for anyone. While Google has a lot of great data and technology that it can use on your behalf, it is not ever going to be able to truly understand and bring your business goals and your strategy to life the way you or someone on your team will. So use it sparingly, but avoid a lot of platform-based automation as much as you can. Some resources or resource considerations. In an organization, someone who does SEO is typically going to be maybe a marketing specialist, maybe someone on your IT team, or whoever is the person primarily responsible for creating the content on your site. From a paid search perspective, that might be a digital marketing specialist. A lot of small businesses choose to outsource. If you do choose to outsource, that's totally fine. We would just encourage you to ask certain questions like make sure they are a Google partner if possible. An agency or a freelancer that is a Google partner has to have achieved certain certifications, certain training, and has had to demonstrate a significant amount of experience and, more importantly, success in the platform to achieve this partner status, and they have to continue to do so on an ongoing basis. So this is really something to look out for, especially on the paid side, to make sure that this person knows what they're talking about. You want to talk to them also about how many clients they've currently done this for. You may want to ask, have you ever done this within the commercial laundry space, for example? And you want to get a sense for how often they're going to be in the platform, analyzing and possibly making adjustments. If you get a sense of a lot of kind of set it and forget it mentality, again, run. And I've said it before, I'm gonna say it one more time, avoid most automation. There's sort of that platform-based automation within the individual platforms like Google Ads that we talked about, but there's a lot of other kind of software options in the works that try to sell themselves to kind of small and medium-sized businesses as we manage this all for you. You set up your goals, we'll take care of it all. Again, I strongly advise against those where you can. I'm sure you still have a lot of questions about paid search and SEO. So we're going to leave you with some training resources. As was mentioned earlier, you will get copies of the presentation. So we have links to these in the notes of their presentation, but these are a handful of some of the most reputable blogs and online resources related to search engine marketing from a paid and organic perspective. Of course, Google has an incredible amount of resources within their website as well. So if I could leave you with hopefully one key takeaway, it would be that, really having a combination of an effective paid and organic search strategy can be incredibly beneficial in driving quality traffic to your business.